All right. Hi.
All right. Hey.
It has been a while. It's been a while since we have
Yes.
recorded a session.
Yes.
I mean, not a
Yes. Welcome
session,
back
a
to Circulating
podcast.
Love. Yes. Our discussion series.
Discussion series. Yes, I like that.
Yes.
Our discussion series.
You came up with it.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, great. It's been that long. It's been that long. Welcome back to Circulating Love, our discussion series.
Yes. Welcome back. It's been a while. Why has it been so long, Callie?
Why has it been so long? That's a great question. So here we are talking about, conflicts and circulating love and deepening relationships and all of that. And you and I were navigating a conflict.
Yeah.
And, I just like top level. I just love, I mean, how meta it is in general, but this really speaks to the importance of like pausing and taking a break and working through conflict because so many people are like, but I'm so busy, I can't. I'm so busy with the work that and it's like
Mm-hmm.
this is the work actually.
Mm-hmm.
Because like
Mm-hmm.
we could have like brushed it under or swept it over, or said it was fine, but instead we were like, cool, let's pause and spend our
Yeah.
time talking about that.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, but I've been reflecting a lot on that feeling, that sense of urgency or like needing to keep going, or like, what if other people want to hear, other people are excited about what we're talking about? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm so glad that we talked about that together and we were like, let's just pause on this and work through what we're going through. And um as we were navigating this process together, I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I see us talking about this on the podcast and it's gonna be so good. I can't wait.
Yeah. 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 No, and it is really important, and just the process of it, like without getting into it yet, although I think we're going to, it's like
Mhm.
weeks. I mean, like we probably had like four different sessions and we're both busy humans. So we have this one time slot blocked off and we're like, this is the time that we have to do it, And so
Yeah.
like checking in, talking about things, time to reflect back to it, Um, and that is so important. And as someone, I mean, I whatever, we learn our skills as we in the time that we were meant to learn our skills, but so many times I just pushed through conflict to my detriment, to mostly mine, but I'm sure to other people's as well. Like
Hmm.
everything's
Hmm.
fine. It's like push through,
Hmm.
and it may seem like the easier, softer way, but it blows up in the end, and like it's not like it doesn't allow for long term. It doesn't allow for like generative, deepening relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about you use that term like it blows up and it does feel like, at least for me in my experience too, like there's been when I've pushed through or just been like, well, we don't have the time to work through this. Let's just keep going with this thing we're doing together. It ultimately hurts myself, usually the relationship or at least the collaboration thing that we were doing together. Um, yeah, it's just it can feel easier in the moment to just be like, we don't need to talk about this, or let's just, we're friends, right? Like we can just, or we have whatever relationship, like let's just keep going. But in the long term, it can really be harmful to the relationship, to the people involved.
Yeah, yeah,
And thinking about community too, like, and then also to whatever ways people are in relationship or in community or things they're working on together, like then there's also this other rupture that potentially can happen in community or in organizing spaces or whatever it is.
yeah. Yeah, and I know I mean, I have so much trauma around like asking for what I need, And so like it's such a part of why I avoided conflict so long was because my experience is that when you ask for something for what you need, you're told you're asking for too much or that you're told you should be grateful for or, like minimized. like I know everyone says gaslighting now, and I, hate that, but there's just like a framing of like there's something wrong with you because you are asking for something because you have needs, right? And so
Mhm.
like even in this moment, I was like so nervous about like wanting to talk about something. And I was thinking a lot about, in my trainings, I say like conflict can be like direct or indirect, right? And
Mhm.
this really feels like, something that was so indirect because like for me, it was just like, I don't know, something feels off. Like this is how it started, where I was
Mm.
like, something feels off. I don't know what it is. It's
Mhm.
not that like you looked at me and you were like, fuck you, Kelly, and then I could be like, now I'm mad, like, but it was just like something feels off. And like I then had to reflect on like what is it that feels off? And to like then I expressed it and I was like, wait, and then later it shifted, like there was like a whole journey where I mean, so I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna jump in, like we uh, have been like talking very regularly. And at some point, as my schedule shifted and things got hectic, I was like, I feel like I'm getting too many like voice memos and texts, and like I feel like really overwhelmed, and I feel like I don't have the capacity to respond to them. And I was like, just so you know, like I feel like it's a lot. And I can't respond, and I really loved you're like, do you want me to change anything? I was like, no. I was like, I just want you to know that like I might not be able to respond. Like you might end the day like you're gonna get a bunch of hearts. Like I listen to them, but like that's it. Like I might not, I don't have the time, and I was just really grateful that like at that moment you were like, do you need anything? And at that moment I was like, no, don't change. Do keep going. Just want to let you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And, I took in that feedback, and this is where it's like I have my own shit, right? So I'm like, it's bringing up my own stuff around like, oh, I'm communicating too much? Am I saying too much? Have I shared too much? Like, so I'm going through then my own process thinking about that, and then I keep going, well, Callie said it's fine. It's not too much. Like I kept going back to what you were saying, like it's all good. She says she doesn't want you to change anything about your communication. Um, and so I kept kind of going back to that, and trying to use that to like mitigate the my own historical stuff that was showing up, which often does when we have conflict, or when we're feeling off about something, or whatever. It doesn't mean there isn't something happening in the moment too, but also there's often this historical shit too that comes up on all sides.
Yeah. Excuse me. Hello, my dog. He's like,
Yeah.
hi, you're not paying attention to me. I'm in a rolling chair, so this could be really, really awkward. Um, no, but the historical, like, is this historical, like, is this a right now thing, or is this,
Mhm.
feels really important. I'm gonna close my door so he doesn't come back in. Um,
Okay.
uh, and sorry, friend, he'll come back later. Okay, great. This is real life here.
This is
Um,
real life. We're just talking.
and I think then, and I paused at that moment because like, yes, I was like, I don't think anything needs to change, and then I was like kind of like reflecting on like what actually is it like, and does something need to change? Like, and for me, what I realized is that it felt like it wasn't as conversational. I've never been a voice note person, by the way. Like you're one of the first people that I've like ever voice noted with. I don't know if I'd like share that with you, but like um and I dig it. It's like we're on a phone call, but like, it's an asynchronous phone call, which I don't know, like
Yes.
welcome to the fucking 2020s. I don't know. Um, but what I realized, I was like, it feels less conversational and it felt more like just like dumping of info, which was
Hmm.
why I think on top of being busier, it was harder for me to respond because it
Hmm.
wasn't like a flow. Like we were doing
Right.
like 20-minute voice notes about, but it was like in the same theme and we were talking about, all of that. And then this was just
Right.
like, was like hanging out with a toddler. I mean, say this in like loving ways of just like, you know, oh my gosh, like this thing and then this other thing and this other thing and this other thing and this other thing. And like there's a part of me that was just like, oh my God, this is weird. I should just never, ever, ever talk to this person ever again, right? Trauma, right? You know? But then I was like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, like, can we talk about this? Because like something's happening. Like, and I don't know what it is, but like, so then I was like, wait, I do need you to change this. Like, can we stop and can we actually talk about it?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which allowed me to get out a lot more info about like what was happening.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and like also allowed me to, so so you reached out, you communicated that, and then we agreed to a time to talk. And so there was time in between,
Yeah.
which was really helpful for me too. And I want to name that because it gave me space to like digest what you were saying and reflect and come to the conversation, having done that already.
Hmm.
Um, and having worked through like all the other stuff that came up for me around that. So, one thing we talked about is that I had some medical stuff going on. I wasn't on like a medication, and didn't really realize until someone said something to me, right? Like how I knew certain ways that was affecting me, but I didn't know other ways that that was affecting me. So, on like there's this other level where it's like I'm so grateful because now I can actually, if you had never given me that feedback and we had just you just sort of distanced yourself or walked away or just been like whatever, right? If I never received that feedback, I wouldn't be able to integrate that information into like how helpful this medication is, and also if I'm not on it, how that's going to affect me and how I show up, so that I can prepare for that in the future if for some reason that happens again.
Yeah.
Um, and then two, taking that space in between. And it was only like a few days. It was like a Thursday to a Monday or a Friday to a
Yeah.
Monday or something. It was just a few days in between, but I was able to also just like work through the feelings of receiving feedback that I had like done something like uncomfortable or that felt off, or all of my feelings that were coming up about that, embarrassment, shame, um, so that I could really work through that and show up to our conversation on a more present, because if when at least for me, like one of the things that was going on is I started to feel really when you're feeling shame, it's like an emotion that is kind of like you're a bad person usually, like it's something that you're um feeling, putting yourself down. And that was my experience. So I'm like, oh my God, I did this thing. I did this awful thing. I don't even quite know what it was. But I'm totally embarrassed about it and all my fucking perfectionism and all my shit. And now I'm trying to think about all of the things that could have happened. Um, and I came to this realization that I was really compassionate. I had a lot of compassion towards you, of course, as like my friend and someone I care about and someone I want to really like show up lovingly with. And also like really wasn't holding compassion for myself. And I was really recreating this like carceral approach towards myself around like I made a mistake. And so like I'm basically that disposability culture, that disposability mindset. Like I've made a mistake here, I've crossed a boundary, or I've like done something that made somebody uncomfortable. And so like now I'm just a piece of shit. And like um and if I showed up to our conversation that way without having worked through that in advance, that would have, I believe that would have affected how I showed up to be able to really hold space with you and also to like clarify stuff on my end. Because if I can't stand in my own reality and truth and like power and honesty, like then there's actually a power dynamic that's being created in which I'm putting myself below you. rather than us being at the table together having a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that part is so important, because as somebody, and of course, like again, I'm like handling my own shit of like, okay, I'm gonna ask for things, and does this mean I'm gonna lose this dynamic? Like all there's all this fear. And I have been in lots of conversations where when someone jumps right into, well, I guess I'm just the worst in the whole entire world, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling a need to comfort someone and let them know that they're
Mm-hmm.
not the worst and that I care about them. And, depending on how it goes, like I won't get so into that, but like I'm just like thinking of like many situations where it's like at the end of it, I'm like, wow, we just spent an hour with me telling you that you were great. And we didn't even talk about that thing that I came to, because like I care about you. I don't want you to walk away feeling, so it doesn't make for a conversation that can be um, generative or productive in any way because the shift turns from like the action and the behavior specifically to the person. And so like in all of this it wasn't just like you're this person who does this thing. It was like this thing is happening and it doesn't feel right,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I also had to be very very like open and honest about like you know okay, like my work schedule has changed dramatically. Like I'm feeling very stressed about money because I had to walk away from like a toxic job and a toxic client. And so now I'm in this hustle mode and what's happening and what's going on in the world is very stressful. And like, God, most days I really hate white people. And like, like all of
Yeah.
I'm like, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Um, but also I know that like again, like it just didn't feel right. And I think that's like the part about it being like indirect. It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
harder to name that. Um, but having time to reflect is so important to even
Mm-hmm.
to be able to say things out loud, to get in the feelings, because so many folks, and so many folks, me, humans, us, we, it's like jump to defending myself. Like I need to defend myself. I need to da, 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 da,
Mm-hmm.
and when someone like it would have been again easier to either ignore it or even easier to be like, yeah, I don't think this whole discussion series thing is working out. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then like we go back to bumping into each other in random places and saying, hey, like, um, but it's like a really amazing opportunity when someone comes and is like, hey, this isn't working. Can we adjust? Can we, shift? Can we, and it gave me the opportunity to figure out like what the fuck is happening? Like why am I feeling this way? Like I had to reflect too and get clear
Mm-hmm.
on, and I think it over our, what, 4 weeks of conversation, like I think it got clearer to me along the way too about like it's this. No, I also think it's this. No, I think it's a little bit of this. And like even our last check-in, like there was this one thing I was like, one other thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, you know, I appreciate that you did that because even, in advance, because every time you reached out to me and you were like giving me this feedback and it felt like you had done some work around it in advance. It didn't feel like it was just, and I've received messages from people before and I've also, I'm sure, been the person doing the like immediate reaction to the feeling and like saying the thing, and um it tends to feel really sharp and intense and like uh kind of um like attacking, and I just felt like you were speaking from what was true for you because you had done the work to like sort of what you could sift out of like, I don't know what's mine here and I'm figuring out, I know like something feels off. I'm not
Hmm.
sure what it is. Um, and so every time I was able to just be like, okay, hey, let me take this in. This is, I can hear this feedback. And not that it's like I'm not trying to say to you or to anybody watching this that it's like all on the person giving the feedback, but like we both have a responsibility to show up as best we can and to do that self-reflection work when it comes to conflict so that we're actually able to like be clear with ourselves and then with each other about what's going on, at least as far as we know in the moment. Because I think we
Yeah.
both discovered things through the process over those weeks, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what you just said about like it's not up to like yes, in a dream world, I would love to always present feedback in a like a loving, caring, well thought out way, right? And also like there's times where I'm like, "Oh my fucking God, like what is you know?" And like
Mhm.
then I have to go back and like think about it, if I show up in that way, you know. But one of the amazing well, and you and I are both people who like focus on conflict navigation and like we have like there's like even going into conflict is like, is there a model that we want to use? Like um, which models are helpful and sometimes we need to use them and also sometimes we can just like try to pull, come back to them. But when I first started doing nonviolent communication trainings and, these types of workshops, I kind of had this assumption that like everybody would just want to communicate in this way with me, that like everyone is like open and willing to reflect, and obviously that is not the case. There's so many conflicts, but, for me, having empathy, like one of the things I've learned is that even if someone comes at me in a way that's like really volatile, it
Mhm.
is helpful for me to be like, okay, like I hear that you might be feeling really da 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 da. Um,
Mhm.
or I see that it might be really overwhelming for Bob, like that sort of thing. It
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
it is very helpful to, bring down the situation, right? Like to
Yeah.
de-escalate. And so, yes, like we are not responsible for, you know, like everyone's feelings and emotions and all of that. But again, like when we're in relations with people, there might be a desire to, be curious, to ask the questions, to see how someone might be feeling, and
Mhm.
giving the space for that. I mean, I have my feelings and needs chart like right here, and like I'm always like, how am I feeling? How does this make me feel? And and again, like something can just feel off, but like, what does that mean? Like, what's at the root of
Mhm.
that for me? And what
Mhm.
does it mean for me? And how do we work through it? And yeah, it feels so important to say too that like there's anxiety in both sides of, receiving feedback, giving feedback, and it can make a situation uncomfortable. I mean, I was laughing about the fact that there were times like while we were like still navigating where I was like, kind of want to tell Jay this, but maybe I shouldn't text right now because like we're still in the middle of this whole thing and like, is this random? Like, are they gonna be like, God, you said you didn't want to talk so much and now we're talking, like, and so I'm like in this like whole thing of like, guess I can never text you again until we, and it's so funny. But again, because like we have this relationship, I was able to say like, man, I feel really awkward and don't know when I can text you because I brought up this thing, like, but like
Yes.
speaking about that is again, it's so important to be like, how do we build this? And I think that like in many relationship dynamics that I've had, like friend, romantic, work, like you get to a place where like you start off and everything feels great and then it's
Mhm.
not great for
Mhm.
whatever reason because we're human beings.
Mhm.
And I always say when I go into like a, community organizing space, how do we make decisions? How do we make decisions? They're like, well, we haven't really because like we're all on the same page. I'm like, cool. So this is the perfect time for us to figure out how do we make decisions. Because if we wait until we're not on the same page to figure out how we make decisions, then it becomes personal. Then it becomes like that person's wrong or whatever.
Mhm.
And so like so many things fracture at that moment of like now it's not perfect anymore. Now it's not just fun and easy. Now it's not just all giggly. So maybe I'm just never gonna talk to you ever again. How about that? And like that, like
Yeah. No.
I definitely, or like not that I'm never gonna talk to you anymore, but like suddenly we're just not as buddies anymore, or we do
Mhm.
decide to go a different way on a project, or movements, organizations explode and implode all the time for the same reason, and I know that I have been in spaces, the last thing I'll say, where, somebody, I mean, multiple times to be honest, but, where somebody has said that I'm like this terrible, horrible person, blah, 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 blah. There's this whole big thing. And then, like, this one time in particular, like, this one person, like, 8 months later said to me, like, oh, well, when you said this, I thought you knew this. And because of that, it was somebody, and I'll be really honest, it was somebody who had broken up with their partner. And I jokingly said, like, oh, do we like him? Like, and they were like, how dare you ask me that question when you knew that he was abusive to me? And I was like, but I didn't know. And they're like, oh, I never told you that. I was like, no. They're like, oh, I thought you asked that question, and I thought it was so insensitive of you. I'm like, 8 months. You've been like pissed off and like, all this stuff. And I really like it was just a joking, like,
Right.
like, and
Yeah,
so it was like
absolutely.
one of these things where it's like this one misunderstanding that like could have been expressed, and not only did they like stop talking to me, but like they went on like a rampage of, Callie's as like
Hmm.
monster. And I'm like, why am I a monster? Like I didn't like couldn't figure out like why am I a monster? And I didn't even know that it was about that conversation. And so I
Hmm.
just think that, I mean, first and foremost, like we were doing some badass shit. Like we probably could have been doing some badass shit. But went in a whole different direction. And so just like grateful again, like here we are, we're trying to talk about conflict. And like we could have just been like, you know, no, like at any time along this, you could have been like, fuck you, Callie, and then you could have gone the other, like it could have just
Yeah,
all been like,
totally. Yeah. And I feel like, one of the things that when you talk about how when you're in or any kind of group and you're like, how do we work through conflict? How are we going to navigate that? How do we make decisions? I was thinking about that as we were going through this process on like relational level because having talked with you about how we navigate conflict, we've talked a lot even way before we started recording. We've talked in outside of our recordings, right? We talk a lot about different conflict navigation stuff and relationships and things. And like, it feels like um, it doesn't feel like I just had a surface level understanding of you. And so it was something that I was able in my anxiety to like root into of like, I know this person, I know their intentions. I feel, and it was the way I immediately received every message you communicated around feedback was of like, wow, I'm so fucking grateful like that
mm,
you're coming to me and I like feel the love and like like intention in staying in relationship with me and like really deeply felt that. And then my anxiety and stuff would start to come in later, right? And so this was something that I was able to root back into, and it was making me think about some of my other relationships where we talk same thing, like where we do talk about conflict and how we navigate conflict. And when we're talking about it, it's not about like gossiping. Like sometimes we're asking for feedback of like,
mm-hmm,
hey, is this my shit? Like, am I, what do you think about how I'm perceiving this? And, or like, here's how I want to navigate this thing. Um, and that gives me, more, a stronger like foundation of how that person is going to navigate conflict with
mm-hmm,
me. And when I don't have those conversations with people and then we hit a place of conflict, I don't have that
yeah,
same stability or foundation that I'm grateful that we
mm-hmm.
have.
That really hits on an important piece about community, like community accountability, and this, I mean, I'm struggling with this right now where like folks are like, what happened, why did you
Mm,
leave? And I'm like, okay, like there's like a level of like, am I going to tell everyone about this like problem,
mhm,
or are we talking about it to try and fix a problem?
mhm,
And I have a lot of trauma around being someone who like brings up a problem and then everyone's like, God, Callie, why'd you bring up a problem? I mean, like my freshman year of college, this dude got like drunk and violent and like hit me in the nose, right? And like
Oh, fuck.
I complained about it and he got kicked out of the dorm. My whole dorm turned on me. They were like, "You broke up our family." I'm like, "He almost broke my nose," you know? Like it was like this
Yeah.
whole thing, you know? And so like from, you know, and that I mean that was a long, long time ago, 22 years ago. It was 2004. But like, there's like this history of like, wait, like, what do we do? Like, how do we address when there's a problem
Hmm.
and make sure then, like, I mean, we see it in Me Too movement, you know, like just all the things. Like
Hmm.
the first person to say someone's a problem gets
Hmm.
exiled. And then later
Hmm.
everyone's like, oh man, like we knew that. And it's like, yeah, but you know, and so
Hmm.
and so when we're trying to talk to friends and family about, you know, friends, community, whatever, about a potential issue, a lot of the time it can be perceived as gossip, you know, and so that's like an issue. And I think that if you are the person that is receiving this info, it's very easy to either be like, yeah, you're right, they suck, or you know, like just like hype
Hmm.
them up, like, oh, let's kick him out, like F that guy, you know, like all that sort of thing,
Hmm.
versus like being curious about, so like what
Hmm.
happened? Is there, you know,
Hmm.
I think there's a really important role in being able to talk to community about situations without it seeming like you're a bad person for talking to community, because it's going to
Yes.
take community,
Yes.
like community accountability, like accountability. If someone doesn't want to hold themselves accountable, if I can't tell that person, if they're not listening to me, maybe someone else needs to talk to them, you know, and say like what's happening, what's going on, you know. And
Right.
that's just a really important piece of like, let's get feedback from people around us, because like sometimes it is me. Like if
Hmm.
someone can be like, "Oh shit, you better go apologize," and I'm like, "Fuck, you're right." You know, like,
That's my favorite.
damn, damn, you right, you right. You know, like,
Yeah.
so like we can't just be around like yes men, you know, or yes people.
Yes.
Um, we need folks that we can actually talk about, they'll be curious. And that can also say to us, like on the other side, like, no, like you're right. That wasn't okay for that person to do that thing. And maybe you should talk to them. You know, we were having that
Hmm.
dialogue. It's like, fuck that person. Or maybe some other middle ground. Maybe there's like another middle ground where I go and talk to them
Yes.
about that thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, this is where like, um, I think about uh, practice. Everything is what are we practicing? What am I
Yeah.
practicing? How often am I practicing avoiding conflict versus how often am I practicing confronting it, facing that and navigating that and working through that? And another thing I feel so grateful about is that this was like just such an opportunity to practice in such a like really healthy way navigating this. I also had conversations with several of my friends about it where I was reflecting on stuff and things that were going on for me and asking for feedback. And then like one of those, talk about being like generative and moving, spilling out in this way. Like one of those friends just this week brought up something up to me that like was an old thing and that had sort of like lingered and wasn't really like a thing, but like it came back around with something that they
Okay.
saw on the internet, a mutual friend posted, and then we got to have this whole deep conversation about like, okay, so that's how you took the feedback then that I gave you. What if something like that happens now? How, do you feel open to that feedback? And like, here's what I want, and here's
Hmm.
what I want in my relationships. Like, I don't want someone who's just gonna tell me the thing I want to hear. What I want to hear is honesty because I want to grow. And so
Yeah.
I just want like real honesty in my relationships. And getting to say that, like getting to say what we really want from our relationships and what we have the capacity for, what we're open to. So then it's able to be like, So remember that time you said if you were ever doing this thing, you were open to feedback about it?
Yeah.
But so now I'm trying to tell you that this thing, I think I see this thing happening, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That's so, I mean, it's so important. If we're going to be in strong community, we need to be able to work through, these ups and these downs. We need to be able to have the conversations about it. We need to be able to communicate with folks around us because, and we're out of time. So I'll say this and then maybe that's a whole other conversation. But in some way, like people pleasing is manipulative because like if
Mm,
I am ignoring that something is bothering me, or I'm saying like everything's great, it's all wonderful, that's because like I'm like trying to keep you in my world or keep the peace or whatever. And so I'm actually not being myself. And like it gets to this point, there's this old Ellen DeGeneres joke where she's like, can you stop that? And like, stop what? That breathing in and out and in and out. Like
yes.
you get to a point where you're just like, oh my God, you are so horribly annoying to me, but I haven't told you why.
Mm,
Um, and so like I don't want I want to have honest relationships. I don't want to have relationships where, I'm pretending things are okay that aren't, or, I'm like, manipulating a situation to keep people in my life. That is not good.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, so here we are. We're recording again, but it's been a while, and I feel like this is an important, like I said, so meta and so cool that, we're talking about our conflict, but um, just I'm really grateful that we're able to do it, and I feel like a deeper trust, and I feel that we feel like, I mean, I feel like a deeper connection and like more willingness to like jump into things because when it goes wrong, I know that we can talk about it and reflect and be open and all of that. So,
Yeah, it's one thing to say we want something, but to get to actually like move through it together in this way, you really get to see how someone shows up and wants to show up and takes
yeah.
responsibility. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
I appreciate you. And to anyone out there who's listening, I hope that you are going to reflect in your relationships and dynamics and, be willing to share. Be willing to share, be willing to ask for what you need. 'Cause it really does make things better.
Yeah, well, that's the only way we're gonna get our needs met is to communicate or to
Hmm.
find out this person can't do that right now.
Yes. Is unwilling or unable.
Unwilling or unable. I love that. I quote you on that sometimes.
Oh, sweet, sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe that's a shirt too. Anyway, so we'll be back at some point with another
Yes.
discussion. Thanks for tuning in to Circulating Love.
See you next time.